Afghanistan, once a stronghold for the Taliban, is now falling into chaos and uncertainty. The withdrawal of U.S. troops has left a power vacuum, allowing the Taliban to regain control. The Afghan National Army, despite being trained and equipped by the U.S., has struggled to hold ground against the Taliban's advances. Corruption within the Afghan government has weakened the country's stability and trust in leadership. The Afghan people, exhausted by decades of war, have become disillusioned and lack the will to fight. The Afghan military has faced issues of low morale, desertion, and recruitment challenges. The Taliban's strategy of targeted assassinations of civil servants and intellectuals has caused fear and instability. Neighboring countries like Pakistan have played a significant role in supporting and harboring the Taliban. The withdrawal of international aid and assistance has further weakened the Afghan government's ability to function effectively. The Afghan economy is heavily reliant on foreign aid, and without it, the country's infrastructure and services have crumbled. The Afghan security forces have struggled to maintain control of key cities and provinces against the Taliban's rapid offensive. The Afghan government's inability to provide basic services and infrastructure has fueled the population's frustration and disillusionment. Afghanistan's complex tribal dynamics have made it difficult to establish a unified and cohesive government. The Taliban, exploiting the divisions within Afghan society, has gained support and sympathizers among certain ethnic groups. The failure of diplomacy and peace talks between the Afghan government and the Taliban has contributed to the country's downfall. The withdrawal of U.S. air support has left the Afghan military vulnerable and unable to counter Taliban attacks effectively. The absence of a clear political vision and strategy to address the country's many challenges has aggravated the situation. Regional powers, including Russia and China, are now seeking to fill the void left by the U.S. and Afghanistan. The Afghan security forces have struggled with leadership issues and a lack of coordination, hindering their ability to combat the Taliban. The Taliban's use of suicide bombings and guerrilla tactics have made it difficult for the Afghan military to combat them effectively. The Afghan government's failure to effectively address widespread corruption has eroded public trust and support. The withdrawal of U.S. troops has emboldened the Taliban, who are now expanding their control over more territories. The Afghan people, weary of war and violence, are seeking safety and refuge in other countries. Afghanistan's history of tribal conflicts and rivalries has made it susceptible to internal divisions and power struggles. The Taliban's strict interpretation of Islamic law has appealed to some Afghans who seek stability and order. The Afghan government's inability to provide essential services, such as healthcare and education, has further destabilized the country. The infusion of illegal drug trade, particularly opium, has fueled corruption and financed the Taliban. International efforts to build a stable Afghan state have been undermined by limited understanding of the country's complexities. The Afghan government's legitimacy and ability to govern effectively have been undermined by widespread election fraud. The Taliban's intimidation and violence have led to a significant brain drain, with skilled professionals fleeing the country. The lack of access to basic resources, such as clean water and electricity, has contributed to the deteriorating situation in Afghanistan. The Afghan military's reliance on U.S. support for intelligence, logistics, and air power has weakened its capabilities. The Afghan government's failure to address systemic inequalities and grievances has fueled support for the Taliban. The Afghan people's disillusionment and lack of trust in the government have made it easier for the Taliban to gain support. Divisions within the international community have hindered efforts to support and stabilize Afghanistan. The Taliban's resilience, adaptability, and ability to exploit societal vulnerabilities have contributed to Afghanistan's fall. The Afghan government's inability to effectively govern and address the needs of its people has led to its downfall. The lack of unity and coordination among Afghan security forces has further weakened their ability to counter the Taliban. The involvement of external actors, such as Iran and Saudi Arabia, has fueled proxy wars within Afghanistan. The Taliban's control over key transportation routes and infrastructure has further isolated the Afghan government.